Yoga. Welcome. I'm here today with Elizabeth Dickinson, one of my friends and a fellow teacher here at B Yoga in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're getting together today because Elizabeth has one of the most common injuries in yoga, which is a strain or a tear to the hamstring attachment. We have 3 hamstrings on each leg, the back of each leg, and at the back of the pelvis where the hamstrings connect to the ischial tuberosity, or as we call them in yoga, the sitting bones, we can often get a strain or a tear. And these injuries happen most often when we're in a forward fold like Uttanasana or Prasarita Padottanasana, or even sometimes in a pose like downward facing dog, when the hamstring attachments are open and vulnerable and unprotected. So what we're going to look at today is how to access the muscles of the hamstrings themselves and the muscles around the hamstring attachments, which are the glutes, like the gluteus maximus and the gluteus medius, in order to keep the hamstring attachments safer, and so that we can stretch out, we can extend in our poses with more integrated power. Okay? We'll also look at how to fold forward and come back up safely in those times when the hamstrings are the most vulnerable to this very common yoga injury. Okay? So we're going to actually start on the tummy. If you'd like to join us with us, please come onto your tummy on your mat. To the right. Okay. So the first thing we're going to look at is how to engage the hamstring muscles. Most of us know what a stretch in the hamstrings feels like, but to engage the muscles, there are a couple of actions that we can use. So laying on your tummy, I want you to imagine that your toenails are glued. They're super glued to the floor. So I'm going to ask you to try to lift one of your legs off the floor, but you can't, of course, because they're super glued. So go ahead and try to lift your right foot away from the floor. Yeah, and you may feel the muscles at the back of the leg start to fire up. Do you feel that, Elizabeth? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another way to engage them is to isometrically draw from the periphery in towards your core. So you can imagine pulling from the toenails up towards the knee. If you tend to hyperextend your knee, you can even bend the knee towards the floor here and drag the toes and the knee forward. Now, do you feel your hamstrings engaged there as well?
Yes.
You may also feel your abdominal muscles engaged, yeah, as the thigh bone is integrated more fully into the hip socket. Okay? Do the other side, gently trying to engage the hamstrings by pretending to lift the left leg away from the floor and pulling it in from periphery to the core. Good. Yeah, it's a lot of work, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's worth it.
But it's worth it, yes. I've torn my hamstrings on both sides. Actually, the first time I tore my hamstring attachment, I was in a class, and a very well-meaning teacher came and pressed down on me while I was in a forward fold, giving me an assist. But my hamstrings were wide open, my attachments quite vulnerable, and it was a dangerous assist. Now I know how to keep my hamstrings safe, how to receive those assists better. Okay, so come down onto your forearms again.
Like this, or like
yeah, all the way down. Maybe make a pillow of your head with your hands. Engage your muscles again. You can do both legs at once now. Imagining the toenails are glued down. Lift away from the floor, keeping the toes down, but lift the legs. Pull in towards the core. And now from the core, stretch back out as if you were going to push a button with each of your big toes, way out on the wall behind you. Stretch back. So now the hamstrings are engaged. And as you stretch back, you'll also start to engage the glutes, the gluteus maximus muscles, which are the big muscles of the glutes, the back of the pelvis. Those muscles will engage in order to stretch your legs longer. Good. This is a great way to practice finding these muscles, isolating them, and also strengthening them. You can also do this by lifting the leg a couple inches away from the floor. So go ahead and lift your right leg. Extend it out. Press that button with your big toe. Switch legs. Try the left one. Good. Lifting straight up first. Hugging in. Pulling the thigh bone up into the hip socket. Yeah. And then from the core, extending back out. Stretching through the back of the pelvis. Out through the big toe. Good. And you can even try this with both legs. Again, great poses to find those muscles and strengthen them to help heal a hamstring attachment injury that you might already have. Great. Okay, press up to table now. Okay, so we're going to do a pose called fire hydrant, and you'll see in a moment why it's called that way, why it's called that name. In fire hydrant, we lift the knee out to the side. Okay, go ahead and lift your left leg, Elizabeth. Good. And this engages some of the abductors, or the muscles that take the leg towards the outer plane of the body. But we're going to actually create some of a rotation as well. So first lift your right leg, balance up your sides. Yeah. And then switch sides again. And as you lift your knee, also create a rotation. So you're going to point your left knee more up towards the ceiling. Good. And this will engage one of the main external rotators of the hip, the gluteus medius. Yeah. Yeah, as you turn your knee towards the ceiling. Good. Switch sides again. Fire hydrant. Good. Lifting the leg, engaging the outer leg and outer hip muscles, and then turning the knee, rotating the femur bone, the thigh bone, literally in the hip socket. Good. Nice. And you'll notice, as you lift that leg, as you engage those outer hip muscles, the other side will tend to drop. So switch sides one more time. Fire hydrant on the left. And as you do, try to keep your waistline lifted, especially on the opposite sides, on your right waistline. Right arm straight. Good. Hips more or less level, so that as you lift that knee and turn it up towards the sky, trying to lift the knee as high as the ankle, you'll really get into and isolate and strengthen those outer hip muscles. Yeah. Switch sides.
It works.
It works. The pups make it look so easy. Lift your right leg. Stay strong in your core. This gives you really good core stability. Turning the knee up towards the ceiling, trying to lift it as high as the ankle. And yes, if you collapse on the opposite side, you can lift that knee a lot higher. But if you stay strong, like Elizabeth's doing here, strong in the waist, left ribs lifting, left arm straight, you'll really get into those the right outer hip muscles. Very good. Okay, let's come all the way to standing now. And we'll do this in one more pose, which is sort of a variation of Parsvottanasana, okay, pyramid pose. So we're going to take the right leg just a few inches behind us like this. Yeah, that's great. Good. And just as we did on the belly, you can imagine that the toes are glued to the floor, but you're trying to lift the leg up and back. Yeah. And again, the hamstrings will engage. Good. Keeping that, tone your abs, lifting the muscles of the low belly, and from the core, extend back, pushing the floor away with your big toe. Think about that button again. Click it on, click it off. Good. Switch sides. Taking your left foot just slightly behind you. Good. You can hug your legs towards the midline for more stability. Yeah. And then putting a little more weight on the front foot, imagine you're going to lift that back leg off the floor, tone your abs, and then extend back out through your back foot. Brilliant. Good. Switch sides again. Good. This time, let your foot lift up a few inches off the floor. Engaging the hamstrings, lift your abs again, and extend back. You can point your toes more now or floint them, keeping the foot slightly flexed. Press through the big toe mound. Nice. Good. Now let your leg rotate open, so your knee will point out, almost like we're coming to Ardha Chandrasana. And now you'll get into those outer hip muscles again. Once again, lift your abs and extend all the way out through your big toe. Good. Switch sides. Taking your left foot back, lift it a few inches away from the floor. Extend, stretch back through the big toe mound and the big toe itself. And then start to turn the leg open so that you engage the gluteus medius and the external rotators of the leg. These muscles are so important in wide leg poses like triangle, Trikonasana, or Ardha Chandrasana, half moon. Good. Release that down. So, when we come into a forward fold, right, which as we've talked about is one of the most dangerous places for the hamstrings, and also one of the best places to stretch them. There are a couple of metaphors I use in order to teach folding forward safely and coming up safely. And these these practices not only help keep the hamstrings safe, but they help keep the low back safe, and they help keep us from overusing the hip flexors as well. So since you have an injury, I'm going to have you use blocks. And if you'd like to use blocks or anything about this size at home, you can do that as well. Take your feet sitting bones distance apart, okay, lining your hips over your knees, over your ankles, and look down and make sure the feet are parallel. So we start with a good, strong foundation. The second toe is considered the midline of the foot. So if your big toes are a little closer together, that's fine. Lining up the midline of each foot to take your feet parallel. Good. Now, as we lean forward into a forward fold, and as we're taught in yoga, we bend the knees to let the thigh bones go back, and we lengthen the waist, yes, in order to keep the low back safe as we come into a forward fold. We swan dive into our folds. Go ahead and touch the blocks. Good. When we get really good at swan diving, right, sometimes we'll create this big sway, right, where the waistline sinks forward and it opens up and exposes the hamstring attachments. Elizabeth's doing a really good job demoing this here.
Don't do this at home.
Yes, don't do this at home. Okay, so come on back up, please. So the first metaphor I use when teaching people to come forward into Uttanasana, into a forward fold, is to put the brakes on, okay? Yes, it's important to take the thighs back. It's important to open the hamstrings and lengthen the spine in our forward folds. But if we only do that, we end up in a pose like this. Yeah, I'll use the mat, thanks. Right, that looks like a pretty darn good forward fold, except that my hamstrings are so wide open and my belly is collapsed. My abs are not working at all. And honestly, I can't really go any further into it because I'm not connected to my core power. So if I put the brakes on, and by the brakes I mean the outer hip muscles, the glutes, if I put the brakes on my way down, maintaining that the original alignment of thighs back, hamstrings open, spine long, I'm going to keep that, softening my knees, thighs back, leaning out, toning the abs, and then putting the brakes on, engage the outer hips, engage the glutes, so that my hamstrings don't become too exposed or don't open too quickly. Then as I come into a forward fold, my abs still lifting and toning. I can find more length through the spine and more length down through the legs so that I can draw my back, my whole torso, deeper into the fold. And it feels better, and I think I get deeper into it too.
Yeah,
it looks better.
It looks better.
So, coming back onto your mat, swan dive or lean forward into your forward fold, dive forward, but put the brakes on. Engage your outer hips, engage the glutes, and stay rooted from the core to the floor. Good. Yeah. How are you feeling there?
That's good.
Okay. Now here's the other metaphor that I love. Rocket power. So to come back up to standing, we're going to use such strong power from the outer hips, from the glutes, lifting through the abs, like rocket power to the earth. Good. Sound effects help. Lifting through the waist so that you can rise up strong through the legs and light through the torso. How did that feel?
Felt great.
Okay. So leaning forward, putting the brakes on, coming up, rocket fire down to the earth as you lift through the core. Now that can take some practice, especially the rocket fire on the way up, but once you find those muscles, it'll really transform your forward folds and relieve the low back. There's no need for the low back then to grip or the hip flexors to power up so hard on the way up.
I'm going to also press my lower abs up and in as well as push my glutes down.
Yes, definitely.
As I come up and as I fold.
There's a marvelous thing that happens that when we engage the glutes, it makes it easier to find the tailbone, but it also more naturally engages the abs. And sometimes I'll say, you can go through the front door or go through the back door. If you're having a hard time finding the back of the hips, engage the front, engage the low abs, those muscles between the belly button and the pubic bone.
lift them in towards the spine and up. And when you practice that, the glutes will naturally tone. The muscles right above the sitting bones will naturally tone, which helps protect the hamstring attachments. So whether you engage the glutes first or you engage the abs first, front door, back door, doesn't matter. Either one is going to help engage the other. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so cool. So we're going to take this now into a grounded warrior 3. Okay, and you can use your blocks for this one, Elizabeth. Okay. So similar to when we were setting up for Parsvottanasana, we're going to take the right leg in front and take the left leg up the wall. That's it. And square your hips, walking your right foot forward till it's under your hip, and your hands forward on blocks or on the floor. Good. Nice. And you can let your knees be slightly soft here. Hug to your midline. Good. And as we did on the floor, you can even try to level the hips by pulling from the periphery to the core. Good. Now tone your abs. Engage your outer hip muscles. Yeah, especially on the standing leg side, on the right side in this case. Engage your right outer hip muscles and send them back towards the wall. Yeah? And engage the glutes, and from the right side of the tailbone, extend down towards your right heel. Good. And again, you may choose to engage the abs first. That may make it easier. Find the abs so that it's easier to find the glutes. Okay? Now, from your core, extend out through both legs. Press the wall away with your left foot. How do you feel here?
Good.
Okay. So this is a great way to find some more power, more strength with some of these exercises that we've been doing on the tummy and then table pose. Okay. From the core, extend out strong. Only if you feel like you can maintain the power in the core, the abs and the glutes, and not use the back muscles, you can begin to lift one or both hands towards your hips. Yeah. And if the power comes out of the glutes and goes into the back, you'll feel it. Okay? All right, switch sides. The same is true for lifting the hands in a pose like Trikonasana, triangle, or Ardha Chandrasana, half moon. It's a cue I hear a lot in classes, and students will tend, I'm going to do the same thing you're doing except in Ardha, okay? Students will tend to lift with the side waist or the back instead of finding these outer hip muscles. Hug to your midline. The hamstrings do widen as you take the thigh bones back. The hamstrings do broaden. That's where that really yummy stretch comes from. But then we must also add the abs, add the outer hip muscles, add the glutes, and from the core, extend out with integrated power. Rocket power. Yeah. Nice, Elizabeth. Awesome. So we're going to show one more thing, Prasarita Padottanasana, or a wide leg forward fold. Why don't you come here if you don't mind, since you're going to modify.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll use the mat. Here. I think we can both share. So in Prasarita, in order to find the opening in the hamstrings, the thighs do have to move back and widen a whole bunch, a big inner spiral. Okay? But the same principles that we've been practicing apply. We must also engage the abs, the outer hips, the external rotators, and the glutes. And from the back of the waist, the top of the pelvis, the top of the back of the pelvis, root back down, putting the brakes on in order to keep the hamstring attachment safe. Okay, so you can do this with me, just with your feet a little more narrow.
Okay, so you want me to be like right here?
Sure. Okay. So as we come into a forward fold, we'll hug to the midline, hinge forward, keeping the knees soft, taking the top of the thighs back. Right. Here's our swan dive. And right at the point where the belly starts to let go or dump forward, we're going to engage the abs more fully. Okay? Lifting the low abs, lifting the navel, even pulling the rib cage and the sternum back gently. Okay? Then from the outer hip muscles, put the brakes on. Taking the outer thighs back, the outer glutes back, and the flesh at the top of the pelvis down towards the sitting bones and tailbone and down towards the heels. And you can come more safely into your forward fold. How you doing there?
Good.
Okay.
them up. Find that rocket power again. I like to ask my students to take their hands to their hips and turn their fingers to the back side, the back of the room. Then they can find those outer hip muscles, see if they're engaged. And mine are not, unless I ask them to be. They're lazy. So I really have to find them, poke them, wake them up and be like, okay, let's go. I'm gonna lift my abs, engage those outer hip muscles, and with rocket power, root to the heels while I rise up lightly. Yeah, that feel good? All right, high five, high five. So we could keep going forever with this, but I think that's enough for now. Please let us know if you have any questions. You can reach us at heartofthematter@gmail.com. Thank you.